Good afternoon and welcome to Outdoors with John. Today is June 29th and we're standing at the Schmidt Trailhead in Douglas State Forest. This map shows where we'll be riding today. First we'll head west on the Grand Trunk Railroad remains, and then we'll head east all the way out to where it meets the Midland Division of the New Haven. From there we'll head back on the Midland Division, which is also a rail trail, and then we'll work our way up through the single track of Streeter Trail all the way back to our car. Alright, we followed the Streeter Trail and we've come to the Grand Trunk Trail. This is the actual railroad bed built by the Grand Trunk Railroad and never operated from Palmer, Massachusetts to Providence. It was almost nearly completed back in the 1914-ish time frame when the Titanic sank and its chief promoter went down on the Titanic. When they built the Grand Trunk Railroad, they weren't allowed to have any grade crossings. It was in the early 1900s when they did this, and by this time grade crossings with automobiles were an issue, so they tried to build them without any of these grade crossings. And you'll see here that we're going up. And the cut is off to our right. The cut is kind of filled in because there would have been a bridge there, and the bridge has been filled in by dirt so that they didn't have to maintain the highway bridge. So we are climbing the hillside that the railroad would have cut through. And you can see it's a little swampy down there, a couple feet of water, so glad to be going up here. Right is where the bridge has been filled in, and that creates the large lake in the cut because the water has no place to go. It would try to run downhill and it would hit the fill. Had they put a pipe in when they filled that, they might have kept it dry. And many of the recently built rail trails incorporate some of that piping to avoid this situation. So now we're going to ride back down to the railroad grade. So now we've returned back to the right of way. It's overgrown and swampy to our right. It resembles a railroad grade going to our left and west. Remember that the railroads basically had to level out the land, so we're on a little bit of a fill here. And when you have a cut, you got to dump the rock someplace. So if you're engineering this, you want to basically about the same amount of cuts as you have fills, and that way there you have a place, an easy place to dump the excavated dirt and rocks. So this is very typical. When you're crossing something like this, there is probably a culvert down there someplace to let the water through from one side to the other. We are quickly up quite high on this fill. I would estimate that we are about 30 feet up at this point. The trees have grown in, but you can see that along the very sides of the right of way, but a quick look over here shows you that we are very far above the valley. It's a nice view here. So again, this railroad never actually operated. It was built. Basically, the New Haven Railroad had a monopoly in ports in Connecticut, and the Central Vermont Railway, which at that time was owned by the Grand Trunk Railroad, wanted their own port for traffic from Montreal, one that was ice-free and quicker to reach than the current port they had, which was in Portland, Maine. This railroad was built at great expense, and every turn of the way, the New Haven and other railroads fought railroad crossings. They tried to prevent the Grand Trunk from building or even finishing the railroad. And again, in 1914, I believe, thereabouts, when the Titanic sank, construction stopped completely for about a year or two, and then they finished the construction, but they never actually opened up the line to my knowledge, no stations were built, and there was never a revenue train that was run on the railroad. We're starting to come to the end of the fill. As you can see, the land is rising on either side of us. But this is a pretty long fill, and imagine how many little dump cars it would have taken to do this. The big advantage they had back in the day when they were building this was over some of the earlier railroads is they did have things like steam shovels rather than just pick an axe. But it still was quite a challenge to build even in the early 1900s. Bit of a vernal pool here on the right. All right, this is a small cut. It's a little bit muddy. The railroad had to deal with these situations, and they built ditching on both sides to channel the water away, but the railroad has not been here to maintain it. And it sometimes fills in, and these can be some muddy sections to ride through. It looks like there's an alternate path that this cut might be difficult to get through ahead. We'll see how far we can get without getting totally disgusting. The ground here is firm, so even though there's a little bit of water, it's a decent ride. So as we get deeper into the cut, you can imagine the amount of work it took to remove the earth here. Just hope I don't have to turn this thing around in the middle of a swamp. If you take it slow, you won't get too much mud up your back. Keep it in a low gear helps as well. Despite the look here, it's pretty solid. Lots of iron in the water. Looks like we're heading up. We're going to leave the cut. As the railroad goes to the right, our path is going to go to the left and get out of the mud. It looks like the railroad has been filled in to our right. There's a house here and lots of fill, so probably private property on the right. So since we left the Streeter Trail, we traveled about 1.3 miles to this road, Hilltop Drive. The right of way would have probably gone straight across from where we are here. In fact, after this, it looks like it's been built up. You've got some neighborhoods through here, some private property. So we're gonna turn around here. We're gonna head back to Streeter. Okay, we have a circular pond on the other side of the railroad grade, and a local who walked by told me that this was put in by a farmer, so it was not a railroad artifact. But it's interesting that he's collecting water for his cows. We're now on the east side of Streeter Trail, but still on the Grand Trunk. This side is a lot clearer. Right, that raised area looks like the Grand Trunk Railroad right away. The dirt road we're on now is not in the right of way. It looks like there's a cutaway here of the right of way going back to the main road. We should be coming to Wallum Lake Road. We're parallel to the Grand Trunk Railroad right away, but just north of it. I assume this road was probably here in 1911, 1912 when they were building this right away, so there would have been a bridge either on the road or on the railroad to keep the grades separated, which was a mandate for the Southern New England Railroad when they were building it. I don't know if it's official, but the trail does continue on the other side of Wallum Lake Road, and I can see that there is a cut beneath me on the left here, so I have crossed back over the right of way. Looks like we're coming even with the grade, and we are now on the grade. We are east of Wallum Lake Road on the Grand Trunk. Alright, looking a little bit muddy here. At this point, I'm starting to feel like I've got a commitment. It does look a little muddy on the other side nonetheless. Doesn't look that deep. I'm going to chance it. Okay, that's good. Oh, chasing the frogs away. All right, not so bad here after all. All right, we're out on a fill, got past that cut. Wasn't a big cut, but it wasn't very well drained. Looks like we are approaching the Midland Division of the New Haven Railroad, because we probably could have continued straight ahead. My guess is the bridge is out. Aha! In fact, we have arrived on the Southern New England Trunkline Trail. And here's the bridge abutment. That would be the East Bridge abutment. And over here on the right would be the West Bridge abutment. So this is where the Grand Trunk Railroad crossed over to New Haven. At this point, we are riding west on the New Haven's Midland Division. This is called the Southern New England Trunkline Trail on your maps, but it is not the Southern New England Railroad. That was the railroad we were just on, which was owned by the Grand Trunk Railroad. Okay, we're going to head north on the Aldridge Pond Trail, right across from the Mid-State Trail, and we're currently on the Southern New England Trunkline Trail. Here, the Aldridge Trail and the Mid-State are the same, one and the same. This is call it a fire road, maybe. Good road for a fat bike, carrying a lot of gear. Not too steep, not too rocky. Going back to the Grand Trunk Trail on our left. We just turned on to the Streeter Trail, and on our left, as we're heading north, we see another cow pond. All right, we've come back to the Grand Trunk. We're gonna cross it and continue on the Streeter Trail back to the car. Alright, we just finished about 8 miles on the Douglas State Forest, mostly on the railroad trails, a couple of small sections of single track. Alright, thanks for riding with me today. We'll see you out there on the trail.